A warm welcome from the ISO Central Secretariat in Geneva. You are now with us at the Ask ISO livestream, your chance to get answers directly from the experts behind the standards. Today we are joined by Jean-Pierre Méan, a leading anti-bribery expert. He has worked in Switzerland, Canada, and the UK as a corporate lawyer and a compliance officer for leading businesses. He set up the compliance office at the European Bank for Development and Reconstruction, and he served the Swiss section of Transparency International as its president. Jean-Pierre was part of the expert committee that developed the anti-bribery management system standard ISO 37001 when it was first published back in 2016. He led the review of this tool in the fight against corruption that has just concluded with the publication of the new edition this February. Jean-Pierre is also the lead author of the handbook on ISO 37001 that we have brought out together with UNIDO to help companies and organizations make good use of the standards. And he is currently working on the handbook's second edition, so nearly ready to go. He is also very knowledgeable about ISO 37001 accreditation, having served as an expert for the German accreditation body DAX, and he frequently conducts evaluations and audits of anti-bribery systems. A prolific author and speaker, he regularly shares his insights on the fight against corruption at international forums. So basically, we have a leading light in the fight against corruption, and compliance officers and in-house lawyers can rest easy knowing that we have our expert here today. So we're going to talk through all the updates from 37001, 2025. Please do send in your questions and hopefully we'll get a chance to ask them. So Jean-Pierre, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
So let's dive right in. Why do businesses and other organizations want to implement an anti-bribery standard? Basically what we're saying is, what benefits can they expect?
Well, the first use of ISO 37001 is as a benchmarking tool. The standard reflects the best practices in fighting corruption or preventing corruption. So if you want to know where your organization stands in this respect, then you look at the standard, you implement the standard, and you will see where you have to improve yourself. The second use is to use it as a guide, as a programmatic tool to set expectations in the organization. It's just design development that you want to introduce in the way the organization functions. You can use it also for the evaluation of business partners to make sure that your business partners are integral and do not engage into bribery. Then you can also use it to demonstrate best practice. So you can demonstrate best or good practice to your personnel, to your board of directors, to your governing body. The governing body is the body, normally it's the board of directors, which is supervising management, but it's the body that has the ultimate accountability for the organization. So you can demonstrate that you have done something to prevent corruption. You cannot use it as a guarantee that you will not, that bribery will not occur, and not as a guarantee that you will not be prosecuted for that bribery. And you cannot use it as a shield against investigations, but certainly it will help if there is ever some bribery occurring in your field of activity, to show that you had measures in place to prevent this from occurring, and that if it occurred, it was not as part of the company policy, but it was just because somebody decided to break the rule.
Okay, and for organizations looking to put the right systems in place, what are typical challenges organizations face with regards to bribery, and how does the standard specifically address those challenges?
The first challenge, which is addressed in the standard under the title leadership, is to get everybody on board. it is not sufficient to take the decision to implement the standard because it's something everybody does. You have to convince yourself and to convince others that it's the right thing to do. And that conviction must be present at the level of the governing body, of the board of directors. It must also be present at the level of management and of personnel. Now, there will be, depending on the way your business has been operating in the past, there may be some reluctance, especially in the sales and marketing department, where they think that sometime a bribe can help to land an order. Another challenge is selecting the anti-bribery function. The anti-bribery function is a special animal in an organization because companies are normally organized under pyramidal structure from the top to the bottom. And the anti-bribery function must have some independence, some autonomy, because it may have, in certain instances, to take a position which is not the position that management would like to adopt. That you have to say no to be able to say no. So you have to select the right person with the right level of authority, of seniority, to be able to handle this. Then one of the important challenges is managing third parties, especially consultants, intermediaries, agents, because most of the bribery cases, I'm talking about large-scale bribery, are not done directly by organizations, but indirectly through third parties who will organize the contacts with the local ministers or head of state and make sure that they are convinced by a certain amount of payment.
Can I pick up on something you were saying earlier about the challenge of working with different departments? You mentioned sales and marketing, for example. What advice can you give for those that want to create that culture, that it's not just a box-ticking exercise, it's not just a compliance issue? How do you create that culture throughout the organization? What would be your advice to people that want to build that culture?
The first step is a difficult one because it is the conviction of at the top. So there must be that conviction at the top. Now you can develop this or create it by talking about it, by having training sessions for the top management, for the governing body, but also for all personnel. It's very important to have training illustrating the situations where bribery can occur in the real life of the organization. So the other things that get done is to have also presentations in all management meeting, and to have discussion groups, to also to communicate with messages regularly, to illustrate, for example, if cases occur, to in an anonymized basis, to present these cases and how they were solved.
Thank you very much. So now going back to ISO 37001, what's been the most important update in this edition? What has changed over the last few years? What can people that are familiar with the old edition expect with this new version?
Okay, so one change for which I'm not responsible and our group is not responsible is a change is what used to be called the high-level structure, and which is now called harmonized structure. This is a part of the standard that is common to all management management system standard. So this is of formal changes. They are not material changes. Then there is another change which has been made also in all standards. It's a clause on the environment, saying that when looking at the context of the organization should determine where climate change is an issue. It's not a very, it's a requirement, but it's not a very strenuous requirement. The changes that were made in the otherwise in the standard are an introduction of a section about culture. We talked about this before, but it was quite important when we realized after the first edition of the standard was published that the word culture, somebody told me, the word culture appears only once, and it's in the introduction, and why do you not talk about culture? And I said, well, that's a good idea. We should, in fact, say, because culture is very important and very basic. So we have introduced a clause about culture. Then we have also reinforced the role of the anti-bribery function. The text in the old version said that the top management or management should appoint an anti-bribery function with the right level of authority to supervise the implementation of the standard. We took out the reference to the board or to the management to say the anti-bribery function must have the right level of authority to perform its tasks, which means that the anti-bribery function is deriving its authority directly from the standard and not from the appointment by the management. And that's to illustrate what I referred to before, this level of independence that the anti-bribery function must have. So otherwise there is a reference to conflicts of interest. It's, the reference says that the personnel should be made aware that they have to report conflicts of interest. Now, conflicts of interest can be potential conflict of interest arises when somebody has a brother-in-law or cousin who is director of procurement in a company that is a client of the organization. But it is potential as long as there has been absolutely no relationship between the two organizations. There has not been any desire to enter into business. If this desire arises, and if at some point a commercial relationship is contemplated, then the conflict of interest becomes actual, and at this point, the individuals that are affected by this conflict of interest must be isolated from any decision, any relation in that respect. So that's sort of what the change is. As you see, there are not many changes. The review. The review of the standard was reviewed after 5 years because all the standards must be reviewed after 5 years. It was decided to have this, what we call the limited review on these points that I mentioned.
Now, thank you, Jean-Pierre, and all our experts all over the world that were involved in bringing this new edition to life. We have a question from Valencia. Thank you for your question. What will be the challenges for certification bodies in order to transition from the previous edition to this one? And how about professionals that audit organizations in accordance with the old edition? What knowledge or qualifications are needed to audit an anti-bribery management system? What advice would you give for those organizations out there?
Okay, the first part of the question, there is a transitional period. The transitional period applies only to organizations that have been certified before the publication of the new standard, a new version of the standard, on 28 February of this year, 2025. So organizations that have a certificate under 37001 version 2016 can continue to have their surveillance audits or maybe their renewal audits under the old version for a period of 2 years. I mean, the transitional period is from 1 to 3 years, but it will probably be 2 years in our case because there are not so many changes. It is going to be decided by IAF, the International Accreditation Body, this month. So any organization that does not yet have a certificate, that has not been certified, must use the new version 2025 of the standard. Now, as for the qualifications, ISO does not certify. The certification is performed by bodies that are accredited by accreditation bodies. But ISO, together with the International Accreditation Standard, has issued certain rules to make sure that the certification process is independent and integral. And there is a norm, a requirements norm on all the qualification of the auditors, but also how the audits have to be conducted. And there is a specific, I mean, that was the idea when we worked on the standard to say, well, for 37001, you cannot really just use a 9001 auditor and say, well, you're going to certify an anti-bribery management system. You have to know something about corruption and anti-corruption. So there is a technical specification that has been issued, and that says what the auditors at the various levels, lead auditor, have to know if they are auditing the ISO 37001.
All right, and you referred to other related standards there, but what other documents might be helpful to ensure that an organization is covered in terms of anti-bribery management? What other resources could help you?
We have issued in 2020 a handbook. Well, first of all, I mean, the standard itself has an annex that provides guidance on how to implement the standard. But in addition, in 2020, we have issued a handbook or a guide on ISO 37001. This handbook has been written by practitioners, so all those who have participated in the handbook have experience in managing an anti-bribery management system. And we are now issuing a second edition. The second edition will take the changes, a few changes in the standard into consideration, but it will also include some complement on certain chapters where we found after 4 or 5 years that was possible to say more. One instance, for example, would be whistleblowing, because on whistleblowing there is a standard, a guidance, a standard that has been issued, but rather than issuing a full handbook on whistleblowing, they have asked us to introduce in our handbook a chapter on whistleblowing. And this makes sense because whistleblowing is something very important
Absolutely.
in anti-bribery management.
Louisa, just one clarification. Thank you for your question, Louisa. How much time does the company have to implement the changes of the 2025 version? Just to clarify that point, how much time does the company have?
Well, if the company is already certified, it has 2 years.
Yeah, plenty of time. And you have the handbook coming out soon, which will help as well. We have a question from Antonio, which we always get asked and is always interesting. Could any small gift to a business partner be considered as bribery? And just to assure you, we have not bribed you with Swiss chocolate or anything for this. You came just to help us out, which we appreciate. But can any small gift to a business partner be considered as bribery?
So, there is, of course, I mean, just a cap, a Vaga cap, or a T-shirt, or a ballpoint pen are not problematic. Then generally, all organization will set a limit, like say $100 or 100 francs or whatever, and say, well, gifts under that limit are unproblematic, don't have to be reported. In Switzerland, because the level of everything is so expensive, the limit in the federal administration is 200 francs. But that's a bit on the high side. Then for gifts given or received that exceed that limit, I was once making a presentation where I spoke of this limit of $100, and somebody that was in Germany started shouting from the back of the room, how can you say that up to $100 it's not problematic, and so mostly it should be not more than 25. Anyway, it's a question of reason. Yeah. You know, if you make a gift like a bottle of wine or something, which is worth maybe 30 francs, you're not going to buy a minister or to buy even an employee of a company for something like this. So what is really the rationale for gifts being scrutinized is that they can easily disguise corruption. The reason is that if they can influence a person to decide to take a certain favorable decision to somebody.
No, thank you. Now, someone has posed a tricky question. Has the new standard really been used in the past 5 years in Western countries as well as Asia? Is a certificate issued based on it? Is the percentage of use and certificates issued based on it? No. Do we have those kind of?
There is if you go, there is a statistic, a national statistic, which is published every year in September, October. Unfortunately, it's based on the number of certificates outstanding at the end of the previous year. So if you now look at these statistics, you will find the number of certificates outstanding at the end of 2023, which comes a bit late. Now, we see that, and also if you want to see to have information on the accredited bodies, you can find the information on the internet site of the accreditation of the national accreditation authorities. Now, just from the top of my head, I think countries where there are the most certificates are in Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, in South America, Peru, in Europe, Italy. There are not, in Europe, there are not many, apart from Italy and Spain. Spain also has a lot of, but otherwise, in France also a few, but in Switzerland there are 2 or 3, and Germany also quite a few.
All right, Jean-Pierre, we're coming back to the question of culture. You mentioned the importance of that being driven from the highest level. So we have an interesting question from Virgil. In a world where technology can detect anomalies in milliseconds, geopolitical risks transcends borders, and public trust is increasingly fragile, how does the new ISO 37001 ensure not just compliance, but true cultural transformation within organizations, especially in regions where corruption is systemic and normal? So how do we ensure true cultural transformation, building on what you were saying earlier?
Well, the different thing that you can do is to improve the culture. You know, when you go into an organization, when you go in for an audit into an organization, one can feel the culture quickly. It permeates the organization. I did an audit last November, December in a large company, and they had, for example, they had an anti-corruption day regularly, and that was an international company, so everybody was they were in London, outside London. They had the people who were at head office were there, but then the whole world was connected on Zoom. So this is important to discuss and to have people given witness to what they face. The training is quite important. A small discussion also once I did that to ask all managers of a team of 10 people, around 10 people, to have maybe once a month a discussion with their subordinates.
So Jean-Pierre, that leads me to we can have one more question from Kevin, who has asked about this. Can you share your thoughts on how organizations might address this with its employees who travel internationally, and how travel is included in a company policy? Maybe we can just address that quickly before we wrap up.
How travel is included in company policy?
Yeah, and how share your thoughts on how organizations might address this with its employees who travel internationally. How travel is included in a company policy.
Well, at least for organizations in countries that are not very exposed to corruption, the risk is international travel. With international travel, it starts when you land at an airport in a foreign country, and maybe the immigration officer will expect some generosity from you, and then these are cases that are discussed in companies, how you behave in these cases. I mean, what you do is, you say, so the first thing you can say is, we have a very strict company policy, and I cannot, or if I give you something, I will need a receipt.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone that submitted your questions. We will, for those who didn't get a chance to have them answered, we'll do our best to put them answers on LinkedIn. So finally, thank you very much for joining us. All you need to do to find more information about this is go to iso.org/standard/37001 to download a free implementation scenario for the standard, and also receive updates on related standard and resources by email. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Jean-Pierre, for all your answers, and good luck to everyone out there.